Hi, my name is David Goudy. This is the interview. Welcome. Thank you for viewing today. Today we have got a wonderful guest, someone with a story that really is transformational, someone with a story of the amazing grace of God in their lives. And today I want you to be inspired, I want you to be challenged, I want you to be blessed. But I believe that there's people out there who's going to be watching this, and for you especially, this is going to bring you hope. This is going to encourage you so much whenever you hear this young man's story. Today we have Steph Macleod, and Steph is from Scotland. He's a singer, musician, a composer, and he's in Northern Ireland at the moment, and he's been here a number of occasions, and he's going around different venues, and he's sharing his story and song and testimony. And today we are going to talk to him in conversation, and so that he can tell you exactly what God has done for him. Steph, welcome to our studio today. And I just want to go right back to the beginning, because obviously there's people watching this and they have no idea who you are, they don't know what your story is, and so I want to take you right back to the beginning, and you can tell us what happened, what it was like before this transformation happened, and then what happened afterwards.
Well, in 2005, 2006, I was homeless. Alcohol and drug addiction had taken me from every good part or every good thing in my life. I chose to be homeless. It was a place where I could feed my habits in peace. I didn't see it from the point of view of my family, who were beside themselves, just trying to convince me that I was killing myself, but I didn't see it like that, you know. The council were great. They give you a room in a B&B or a hostel where you got a TV and you can drink your benefits away, and I mean that didn't last long. So I once I'd pawned everything that I had, which wasn't much, I begged for money, and I spent years borrowing money and not paying it back, and swindling hundreds and thousands of pounds out of my mum and dad, you know, just it got to the point where they wouldn't give me any more, so I'd steal, beg for money. I mean, I'd do whatever I had to get money, you know, and it was just a 24-hour job being an addict. Very aggressive with a drink. Kicked out the homeless hostels because of it's not just alcoholics and drug addicts that are homeless. You get people that fall in hard times, you know.
Yeah.
So I slept rough. I mean, not all the time. If I found a sofa or a bed, I mean, I was fine. I mean, I even slept in burnt out cars, you know, and sometimes you would end up in hospital, which is always guarantee you a bed, you know. But the summer wasn't so bad, but in the winter when it's past zero, and
Sure.
I mean, that was the worst part of being homeless, was the cold, and probably the worst thing I've ever experienced is out in the cold, trying to stay alive. I could have been home in a warm bed, on the condition that I was clean, but I didn't. I just wasn't within the right headspace. Just didn't want to do it, and
Can I just pause you and ask you, Steph, what precipitated this journey that you took? You know, because obviously people looking at you today, you're very presentable, you're articulate, you dress well, but it wasn't always like that. But there must have been a time growing up when you were living a normal life. But what put you off the rails? What happened to do that?
it wasn't an overnight thing. I mean, my mum and dad separated when I was a teenager, which was really difficult for all of us. My mum got quite sick. We had to move house, me and my dad. I mean, it was just a real change from having the security of a family life. I did what most teenagers do and went off the rails a little bit, you know. But I don't do anything by half, and I went out drinking with my friends who were older, nightclubs, and by the time I was 17, I was, in underground nightclubs 2-3 times a week, taking Class A drugs, going to parties until 7 in the morning, and then going into school, and it used to make me laugh that all the guys would brag about being in the park with their bottles of cider, and I was, I had a bag of cocaine in my back pocket, thinking these guys were idiots, just. And then I thought I was the man. But I mean, this kind of attitude got worse and worse and worse, and I thought it was better than everybody. I ended up losing a lot of friends at school, and I went to music college. I studied classical guitar. I was really good, actually. I studied at the Royal Scottish Academy of Music. But I drank that down the toilet. I just, the banks throw money at you, student loans. I even spent the rent money my dad gave me on partying, really. I mean, I had no desire to study, really. I just it was round about then that substance abuse had really started to consume my life. But being a student, it was synonymous with that kind of lifestyle.
How long did that period go on? Was it 2 years or a year or 6 months or?
I studied for 5 years. I had to repeat some of it because it just wasn't up to scratch. I had to leave the academy. I managed to get onto the course at Reading University, a bit unjustly, I must say, but I got a degree which was barely a pass. And by the time I got home, there was all the baggage that had been there from the past. So I left, travelled for a bit, nearly drank myself to death. And when I came back, I had a real breakdown, and I was psychologically assessed, and they said you suffer from major depression as a result of the alcohol and drugs, and you're an alcoholic. You need to stop. And I couldn't. And even with the help from my parents, who'd reconciled their differences to try and help me, I just decided that I can't drink in peace anymore, being around my family. So I just decided to leave. I got to stay with some homeless places like the Cyrenians and stuff, but I just couldn't stay sober. And they eventually had to ask me to leave because I was aggressive, and I let a lot of people down that really cared about me, but you don't see that. It's tunnel vision. You just want to.
Becomes a very selfish thing, doesn't it? You get so into yourself, and so here you are. You're a drug addict. You're an alcoholic. You're homeless. You're at the very bottom of life. You see no hope. Nothing has worked. Everybody's tried to help you. You've spurned all that help. You're at rock bottom. What do you do at that point? What happened at that point to cause this dramatic change in your life?
I found a homeless hostel run by the Bethany Christian Trust. They have one of their hostels is for men with addiction problems, and they do a recovery course which is Christ-centered. And they tell you this before you go in. It's a dry house. You can't even be on prescribed medication that might be considered addictive unless the doctor absolutely insisted on it. I moved in there. By that point, I desperately wanted to stop because my life was in turmoil. But I knew I had to take the recovery stuff seriously because people I knew were dying around me, And it wasn't easy. They did the God stuff. I'd been to church when I was younger. I didn't mind it. I mean, I think I actually really enjoyed the stories and stuff, but it was never relevant to me as an adult. I don't think I got it really, but it just wasn't relevant to being an addict or being homeless or whatever. I heard a guy giving his testimony about 8 weeks in, and he spoke about his life. He was a church minister, but before that, he'd also been a man with many problems, a life of just turmoil as well, and he'd had issues with addiction. He'd been in prison. He'd been a violent man, and he spoke about freedom as a Christian, freedom in Christ, which being an addict's a bit like being a prisoner, but without any walls. And he spoke about being free, and you speak to any prisoner about freedom, and you're going to get their attention. The real prospect of freedom. And just the way he spoke about God, about giving him the strength to break the chains that had been killing him, and the courage to start living the life he was supposed to, you know, was just, I needed that. I knew I needed that. And when he asked, does anybody want to ask God into their lives, I went forward, and I can remember it. I was terrified. And I think when I prayed to God, well, I know when I prayed to God, I said, if you can hear me, which was a real step of faith, you know, because I'd spent so much time alone. I just said, I'm sorry for the man I am. I just want a life worth living. And a real sense of peace washed over me, which was quite supernatural. And I'm probably the most skeptical Christian you'll ever meet in your life. And the weight of the burden I'd been carrying around for the 10 years, addiction doesn't come without shame. And the things that you do because of your addiction, and the choices that you make, the things that I did to my friends and family, I mean, it was everybody, not just one or two people, but everybody. I didn't realise how heavy the weight of the fear and the anger and the loathing and all that had, until it felt like it was lifted. It was just like a release, and the kind of peace you don't, like when you're a kid and the only thing you really need to worry about is who's in goal. You know, that kind of peace, you know. But just, I hadn't felt that as an adult, ever. And it didn't change anything. It wasn't like my problems were solved. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking in at myself, which is the nature of addiction. I was looking out to something else, which, I'll be honest with you, I didn't fully understand. But it was a complete paradigm shift to being an inward being, suddenly looking out. And the guy that gave his testimony was a minister called Cammy Mackenzie. He said, you know, there will be things that will be too tough for you to deal with, and these are things you need to take to God in prayer. So I did that, and I trusted, because when I prayed, I trusted and I prayed, and my prayer was answered. So I prayed again, and I found great strength in that. And with the help of the people at Bethany, I did a lot of counselling, because I was still homeless. I still had one change of clothes. I had no friends, very little contact with my family, no money, lots of problems. But with the help of Bethany, I started to address these things, deal with them, come to terms with it, and start looking forward. And the things that I had to deal with, which were really tough, I did say to God, you're going to have to help me through this, because every other time I've had to turn to the bottle, or I've had to turn to the drugs or whatever. And I found strength I'd never found before. I sat my mum and dad down and apologised, and they were just happy I was sober. In fact, my dad didn't even let me apologise. I just said to Dad, he says, look, it's all right. It's all right. Because he knew that it didn't matter, because I was his son.
Yeah,
you know?
he loved you.
But I mean, I don't need to say anything these days, because when they come round to the house, they see my kids. I've got 3 kids now. And my kids are a witness to God's grace.
Absolutely.
And it's not been easy the last 7 years. I mean, I think being a Christian is really difficult, but I've lived more with Christ in my life than I ever thought I ever possibly could. And I see my children in the morning, and I'm like, you are miraculous, because it is a miracle that I'm even alive today.
It is.
I shouldn't be.
No.
And
I was just sitting there thinking that very thought, that if it hadn't have been for the grace of God, Steph, in your life, not only would you not be talking to me today, but you probably wouldn't have been alive today. Certainly wouldn't have had 3 kids.
no.
You know, your whole life was just a complete mess. But isn't it wonderful that in the grace of God, that Christ comes into the messes in people's lives and completely and utterly changes them? And that's the wonderful grace. People may look at you and say, well, that's a wonderful story, and they maybe sympathise with your plight and your problem, but and think, well, thank God I'm not like that. But the reality is that anybody could end up in your position if the conditions were right, or conditions were wrong, actually. Anybody could end up an addict or an alcoholic or on the streets or whatever.
I think everybody has struggles in their life.
Yeah.
They don't come in the forms of addiction or being homeless. Life is tough. I mean, even now, even as a Christian, I still have problems. You know, it's life is hard. There've been things that have happened in the last 7 years that have been incredibly difficult for us. My wife lost a baby 2 years into our marriage and became very ill because of it, and she's still very ill because of it. But this drew us closer together,
Sure.
and in prayer, it drew us closer to God. I mean, really,
Yeah.
in need of something, you know.
Yeah.
And it was a real season of difficulty, but through time, our first daughter was born, you know, who's an angel,
Yeah.
and that's why we called her Seraphim, you know.
Yeah.
She's just
That's an unusual name, eh?
yeah, but she's an angel,
Yeah.
and we have a 7-month-old now called Eden Rose, who's just equally as amazing, you know, and
That must bring great joy into both your lives. And
yeah, I mean, Jane had a 7-year-old boy when I met her,
Yeah.
who's now 14.
Yeah.
And he's the only blonde Macleod in the family, but he wears it well, you know. And he's my son.
Yeah,
I love him
absolutely.
to pieces, and
Absolutely.
we still have the struggles in life. But I mean, we would never be able to differentiate between joy and struggles without the other, you know. I mean, the trials that we face in life, they do make us stronger, and it's the way that you deal with them that will define you as a person.
Yeah.
And I've always learnt great, valuable lessons in dealing with these things, and the lessons that God has put before me. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And sometimes I'll say to Him, you know, I can't deal with this, man. You're going to have to show me. You're really going to have to lead me out of this.
Yeah.
And He'll do that.
Yeah.
And sometimes it makes me, I can hear Him clearly in my heart, and He'll say, you're going to have to stop and face this, and you're going to have to fight through it.
Yeah.
But you will prevail because I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
You know, it's like my kid, James. There are times where he just doesn't get it, and he'll say, well, what about this, what about that? And he's just nip, 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 nip. And I'll say, look, just get on with it. And whether you succeed or fail, I'll be here for when you need me.
Sure.
And he'll come back and he just doesn't work. And I'll say, well, have you tried this? No. It goes away, or he'll come back and he'll say, I got it. And I went, well, you learnt a valuable lesson there, didn't you?
Absolutely.
And I think that's the way God speaks to me. I know that's the way God speaks to me, you know.
Before we end our conversation today, Steph, a lot of your material, your songs, do they come out of your experiences and what you're currently maybe feel you're going through that people can identify with, struggles in life that everybody's got? But some of your songs maybe, do they relate to those struggles in life and how you got through them? And
yeah, I mean, songwriting's any form of writing's a great vessel to put down anything you want to communicate to somebody. And I mean, it is a bit of a cliche, but I do draw inspiration from things that have been happening in my life, you know. My first album was about the impact that Christ had on my recovery. And He was literally the light in the darkest night of my life. My recent album has been more focused on seeking the heart of God and knowing the heart of God and seeking His kingdom. But within that, there's lots of different things. There's the reality of the crucifixion. I mean, what Christ did for us. Crucifixion or crucify. As a Christian, I just felt it's a word that we use a lot and sometimes can lose its weight, you know. And I spent a year trying to write a song, trying to understand the reality of it from a personal place, you know.
Yeah, good.
James as well, he's at an age now where he's asking really important questions, because I've made it clear that, you know, he'll need to make his own choice one day. And that's the beauty of it. It's a God-given right to choose the path that you walk. And while I'd love him to have my beliefs, he needs to find his path for himself. You can't force somebody
Well, it's an old cliche, but God has no grandchildren, he's only children, so everybody's got to make up their choice at some point, no matter how long they've been with their parents and have a godly heritage, but every individual's got to make up their own mind.
He did say to me one time, because I encouraged him to ask questions, and he said, what is the point in praying if God knows what you're going to pray for? He knows everything that's going to happen.
They ask the most profound questions, children, don't they?
It is really amazing. And I had to really think about it, and I said to him, remember when you asked me for a laser pen, you know, the ones that can potentially take out aircraft? And I said no for that reason. And then I said, remember when you asked me for a Swiss Army knife? He doesn't always ask for dangerous things, but I asked him why, and he said, the other guys and scouts have Swiss Army knives. So I said, well, how old are they? He said 17. So I said, well, if you're in the scouts when you're 17, I'll get you a Swiss Army knife. And then I said, remember when you asked your mother and I for a Bible? And we said, of course you can have a Bible. Why do you want a Bible? And he said, because the other kids in Sunday school have a Bible, and I'd like to have my own Bible to read scripture like the rest of them. And I said, that's a bit like prayer. Sometimes you ask for things you're not meant to have. Other times you ask for things you're not ready for. And sometimes you just need to ask for things and you'll be given them. But how do you think I'd feel as your dad if you knew I was going to feed you, clothe you, put a roof over your head, pay for the electricity that powers your PlayStation, or take you trips, or all of the above, and you knew that was going to happen, so you decided to completely ignore my existence? He says, well, you'd be gutted. I says, of course I'd be gutted. I says, I'm your dad. I want to know when things are great, when you've scored a goal, when you've met a girl, when you're doing good at school, but I also want to know when you're struggling. I want to know when you're falling and you need help. I want to be here to help you. I want to know every part of your life because I love you. I'm your father. And I said, and that's why we pray, because while finding salvation through Jesus Christ is priceless and incredibly important, the journey is just as valuable, mate. You know, it's a life in all its fullness with God.
Good.
And these are things that I ended up writing. We spoke about prayer and the Lord's Prayer, and through that I ended up writing a song with the Lord's Prayer. Good. So it's these things that you know
come out of life's experiences. And just about to close, if somebody comes to one of your concerts, in a few words, Steph, what would your message be to those people?
It's not about me. It's about you and God. And if you come to one of my concerts, while the songs are about my life and meeting Christ and what it's done, your testimony is just as important as mine. And I just want you to know that it's about you and God. You and God. It's not about me and God. It's about you and God. It's so
you want the people to connect with God.
Yeah.
When they come, they listen to you and they listen to the words of your songs and they hear your story. The idea is for them to make a connection with the Almighty God that can change their whole life forever.
Well, God spoke to me, a bum on the streets.
Yeah.
He didn't need to, but he did, and all it took was the courage of a guy to tell me his testimony 7 years ago. And I've been immeasurably blessed since then with the life. So I believe that if I share my testimony, if people can find life in Christ, which I believe and I know that they can, then that would mean everything to me.
Everybody, Christ has given all of us a testimony to share. And it's amazing how many lives can be touched by sharing our testimony, by showing the grace of God, what God has done for us. Stuart Hamblin he lived in Hollywood, and it was during the era of the film star, particularly, the John Waynes and the Kirk Douglas and all of those guys, the old guys. And he became a believer. And he didn't know what to do about it because it was so alien to that whole industry he was in. And for a little while, he was a secret disciple. He didn't tell anybody. But one night in conversation with John Wayne, he felt the courage to tell John Wayne his story. He had found Christ and his life had been changed. And he says, for months and months now, he says, I've kept it a secret. And John Wayne turned around to him and he said, why are you keeping it a secret? If you believe God has done this, why keep it a secret? And he went home. He was a musician and a singer. And he went home and he wrote a song, "It is no secret what God can do. What he's done for others, he can do for you." And it's a wonderful old song, many, many years. As a little boy, I remember hearing my parents sing that little song. And it was so true. And his testimony touched so many, many people once he had the courage to share it and to tell it. What God had done for him, he could do for others. And Steph, what God has done for you, he can do for those who are watching today. And maybe there's somebody watching you right now. And maybe they're not homeless. Maybe they're not out in the streets lying in a burnt out car. But their lives is broken. And they feel part of their life has been destroyed by sin or by a habit or whatever. And they've been listening to you today. And hope has sprung up in their heart. Light has come in. And they're thinking, God, if you can do that for Steph Macleod, you can do that for me. And he really can. And he can do it for you. God changed this man's life several years ago. And now he's singing and he's testifying of the grace of God. And you've heard him say today about his beautiful children and his wife and his family. That's the grace of God. And what he's done for him, he can do for you too. So thank you, Steph, for sharing your testimony today. It's been a privilege to have you. And we look forward to hearing your songs and hearing your story all over again, because it's so inspiring and challenging. And thank you for watching today. And we hope and trust that you can come back again and see some other interviews of people who has wonderful stories of the greatness of God in their life. So thank you and God bless you.